lack of sleep causes dementia and Alzheimer's. And if you can't sleep, that should scare you. And if you think taking a sleeping pill is the answer, it turns out it makes things worse. In one of my previous episodes, I talk about why sleep is as important as diet. And whether you heard it from me or someone else, you're probably aware by now that sleep is important, but knowing that doesn't solve the problem if you still have trouble sleeping. So why can't you sleep? I have absolutely no idea. And the reason I don't know is because there are so many different reasons for insomnia, and you probably have more than one thing that's disrupting your sleep. And you have to start with one issue and keep peeling it back like an onion. Today, I'm going to talk about all the underlying reasons that cause insomnia so you can start figuring out which of these applies to you. Some may be more obvious than others, and if you start addressing each of these, your sleep will get better. If you listen to me on the podcast, my hair looks really good today. I'm using my wife's stethoscope that she bought me, and I'm wearing a black sweatshirt. Enjoy doing your dishes while you're listening to this. Share this with the people that you love, and especially if there's a topic that speaks to them so that they can become the game changers in their life. And wherever you are, join the conversation. Let us know that you're here. We actually read every single message. We really do. So before I talk about the why insomnia, let's talk about a quick recap of why sleep is so darn important. First of all, it helps brain function. Now, you know that if you skip a night of sleep, even one night, the next day, you're not as sharp as if you have a good night's sleep. Now, how sharp can you be if chronically you're not sleeping well? You may not even realize it because you're just used to just not being on top of your game anymore. It keeps emotions in check. It's pretty simple. You know that if you skip a night of sleep, you feel pretty cranky. If you're feeling cranky right now, you know what I'm talking about. Imagine multiplying that every day. It reduces the disease risk. Cardiovascular. During sleep, your heart, your blood vessels are healed and repaired. Sleep deficiency is linked to heart disease, kidney disease, high blood pressure. A study found that even modestly reduced sleep, like just 6 to 7 hours instead of the 7 to 9 that you need, was associated with a greatly increased risk of hardening of your arteries, which is connected to heart attacks. Immunity. During sleep, there's a peak in the number of T cells, which are your immune cells, and not getting enough sleep can affect how the immune system responds to viruses and other infections. This is why they tell you when you're sick to rest, because you really need to sleep and rest when you're sick. Inflammation. Long-term reduction in sleep can also lead to constant levels of inflammation. So if you're dealing with inflammation, you need to sleep. And it keeps your weight under control because it messes with two hormones. There's a hormone called ghrelin, which makes you hungry, and leptin, which makes you feel full. When you don't get enough sleep, your ghrelin goes up and your leptin goes down, which means you feel hungry when you're sleep deprived. And so the next day, you're likely to eat more. And if none of that scares you, of course, as I said earlier, lack of sleep is linked to dementia and Alzheimer's. Your brain has a drainage system called the glymphatic system with a G, not an L. And it's a system of cleaning and repairing for the brain. It's only activated at night while you're sleeping. So if you're not sleeping, you're not clearing out the brain. This glymphatic clearance plays a major role in Alzheimer's. So sleep deprivation does not allow the brain to clear out the waste. That's linked to Alzheimer's and dementia. So hopefully, between all of this, I've scared you enough to realize how important sleep is. Great, but I still can't sleep. What is insomnia? Insomnia is, for those of you, some people can't fall asleep and some people can't stay asleep, and some of you are sleeping but not feeling well rested. Why is this happening? As always, our goal is to find the underlying cause. Taking a sleeping pill does not do that. When you take an Ambien or another pill, you don't solve the problem. You don't have an Ambien deficiency, right? Ambien and other sleeping pills work by depressing your central nervous system. And that also means it also slows down your brain activity. And it's intended to be used only sparingly or temporarily, 3 to 4 weeks, because it's addicting and causes side effects. Now, when Ambien first came out, the makers of Ambien, they marketed it saying that it was going to be less addictive than what was previously used, which is a class of drugs called benzodiazepine, like Xanax. So when they marketed it, they said it was less addictive than benzos for people with insomnia. However, while it takes a little bit longer to develop an addiction to Ambien and the withdrawal is a little bit easier than benzos, Ambien is still an addictive substance. In fact, it's now recognized that Ambien has a similar abuse potential to benzos. So that's definitely not the answer. And if you say, okay, well, I don't use Ambien, I just use over-the-counter drugs like Unisom or anything PM, Advil PM, Tylenol PM, those PM formulations also have side effects, including the next day it's difficulty focusing, you're more tired, and prolonged use of those PM products is linked to dementia. So, not the answer. The pills are not the answer. In fact, it causes more problems. So, what's the reason I can't fall asleep? Remember, I'm going to go through the list, but you're likely to have more than one cause. So, as I go through these lists, you have to understand that you're going to need to tackle a few things on the list to get a good night's sleep. This is not going to be a quick fix, right? That mindset of a quick fix is what gets you going to that Ambien or that other medication. This is going to take a little bit of detective work on your part. So let's start the list. Of course, I always forget to click something, so I'm clicking now. So let's start that list. First, chronic stress. About 80% of people who develop chronic insomnia first had an initial event that was very stressful that led to an overproduction of cortisol at the wrong time. A divorce, a death, a new job. Our brain registers this event as a threat and starts to release cortisol at the wrong time. Now, for some of us, once the event is behind us, we're back in business and we're sleeping like a baby again. But for others, that initial event now becomes something that we learn and we are no longer able to sleep at night. And for some people, this is really important. This may not apply to all of you, but for those of you listening that this applies to, I want you to take a moment here. It may have started in childhood and you may not realize it. If you had a difficult childhood, I want you to do an online questionnaire called ACE, ACE. It stands for Adverse Childhood Events, and it gives you a score. And if you get a high score, it means you had a pretty intense childhood and probably some level of trauma. Now, different people respond differently to trauma, but if you have some sort of PTSD or, some post-traumatic issue, for some people, the nervous system is so jacked up and they don't realize it. But one of the things that comes up is difficulty sleeping because people with PTSD don't feel safe when they're asleep. So if this is you, all the other things in the world may not help you because you may need to address this issue first. So if this has been a lifelong issue, I want you to take a look at that. And then you might need professional help, or just recognizing it and doing meditation or breath work is really important. But first part of it is realizing that your insomnia may be from this. Next cause of insomnia, dopamine. Dopamine is something that we get from our phones. Now, just so you understand, dopamine is a super strong drug. We actually give it to people when they're about to die to try to bring them back to life. It's part of a resuscitation protocol. When you're lying down in bed and scrolling through your phone, you're flooding your system with this dopamine. Now, people will say, I use my phone to help me fall asleep, but that's not actually what's happening. What's actually happening is that you're staying awake longer on your phone. You're getting this dopamine rush. And then eventually you exhaust yourself to the point of falling asleep. But if you never picked up your phone to begin with, you would have fallen asleep faster. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. Remember, there was a life before phones. Number 3, learned behaviors. This is a big one because a lot of people don't realize how much they do this. And I was guilty of it too. I have patients who tell me, I wake up every single night at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. Well, how do you know what time it is? Well, because I looked at my phone and checked the time. That process of looking at your phone or looking at the alarm clock to check the time to see what time you woke up is actually teaching your brain to wake up at that time. You would be amazed at what happens if you take the clock or the phone out of your room and you wake up at night not knowing that it's your wake up time. You'll probably fall back asleep. Sleep trackers, by the way, do the same thing. People have the sleep trackers on the wrist. If you have a bad night's sleep and you're tracking it, your brain registers that we're supposed to have a bad night's sleep, and it continues on and on and on. So there's a lot of learned behaviors that we don't realize that we're doing. Number 4 of the reasons for insomnia, disrupting your circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is like an internal clock that you have. And that internal clock is based on light and dark. When our brain sees light, it knows to wake up. When it sees dark, it knows to go to sleep. But as we all know, we expose our brains to light way past our bedtime, right? Our phones, our computers, our TVs, it's all light all the time, all the time. So it tells our brain that it's daytime and releases cortisol at the wrong time. Another thing that messes with your circadian rhythm is eating late meals. Totally confuses the body. It tells your body that, hey, we're still eating, we're still busy eating and digesting, so we can't possibly go to sleep. There's this disconnect because after a big meal, the body has to devote energy to digesting the food, but that takes hours. In the meantime, if you're trying to sleep, it's slowing down your digestive because when we sleep, we're not digesting. So it becomes this the battle of who's going to win. And then this digestion issue not only disrupts your sleep, but it makes you more likely to have reflux, which also interrupts your sleep. So don't do that. So to be in line with our internal clock, we need darkness in the evening and to stop eating 3 hours before bedtime. Yes, 3 hours. You cannot snack and then go to sleep. I mean, you can, but you won't sleep well. Number 4 doesn't apply to all of you, but something we should need to talk about: restless leg syndrome. This is a long-term disorder that causes people to have like an urge to move their legs. They'll have an unpleasant feeling, like a tingling or crawling sensation, and it only goes away if they move their legs. And this usually happens when they're sleeping, when they're at rest, and therefore it's hard to fall asleep because their legs are constantly moving. And there's medication for it. But of course, we discovered that restless leg syndrome happens more frequently to people who have an autoimmune issue. Many of my listeners have autoimmune issues. So manage the autoimmune issue, the underlying issue, and the restless leg syndrome gets managed as well. Restless leg syndrome brings me to number 5, which is your gut. For insomnia is if your gut is off. There's a higher correlation in people who have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and restless leg syndrome. And it has to do with inflammation or the inability to absorb certain nutrients. But we're going to take it a step further. Your gut doesn't just create restless leg syndrome. Your gut can actually create sleep issues. So if you're one of those people who have bloating and discomfort in the daytime, this underlying belly issue is also affecting your sleep. Fix your gut, you fix your sleep. Number 6, sleep apnea. If those of you suffering, you know all about it. Sleep apnea, for those of you who don't know what it is when you stop breathing at night. Let me click some things here because, of course, I skipped one already. It's when you stop breathing at night, and that disrupts your sleep, as you can imagine. Now, many people know that if you're overweight or have a large neck size, that contributes to sleep apnea. But you should also be aware that even thinner people can have sleep apnea. It could be structural, it could be the position that they're lying in. But if you are thin, don't think you're exempt from the possibility of having sleep apnea. And you have to address that also because everything else, you could take melatonin until tomorrow. If you have sleep apnea, it's not going to help. Number 7, for my postmenopausal women out there listening, hormones. Estrogen and progesterone play a role in your ability to sleep at night. So when it starts to fluctuate, insomnia comes around. And for those of you suffering from hot flashes, you know that it makes it so much more difficult to sleep when you have a hot flash because it raises your body temperature. You get increased blood flow to your face and your chest. This heat sensation wakes you up and it's energizing. So now it's hard to fall asleep. And if you're lucky enough to fall back asleep, it's still disrupted the rhythm of your sleep. And so your sleep quality suffers. Number 7, people fight me on this one. Number 7 is alcohol. And they'll say, every time I drink, it makes me sleepy. How could this possibly disrupt my sleep? People think alcohol helps with sleep because it makes them drowsy. But yes, it helps you fall asleep, but it will absolutely disrupt your sleep later on. As it clears out of your system, you're going to start to awaken. Some people, they awaken from hypoglycemia. Some people awaken because they're so dehydrated, but it wakes you up. And if you're in your midlife years, it's also a bladder irritant. So it's going to make you go to the bathroom. And it's also a hot flash trigger. So it's affecting your sleep in lots of ways. Yes, it'll make you fall asleep, but yes, it'll also mess up your sleep later on. And we also have to talk about caffeine. Caffeine, everyone has different ways of metabolizing caffeine. Some people are fast metabolizers, some people are slow metabolizer. If you're a slow metabolizer, the coffee that you had at around 12 o'clock is going to be in your system when you're ready to go to sleep at 9 p.m. And at 9 p.m., when you can't fall asleep, you're not even going to imagine that the coffee 9 hours ago is still in your system, but it really might be. So make sure you're not taking any type of caffeine after lunch because it really disrupts your sleep. And remember, it's not just caffeine. It could be, not just coffee. It could be in your sodas, sugary snacks. All of that is a stimulant that can disrupt your sleep. And lastly, let's talk about water intake. If you didn't get all your ounces of water that you want to take in all day, it's not the time to do it an hour before bedtime because obviously you're going to wake up to use the restroom. So do not catch up on your water intake in the last few hours before bedtime. It's not going to work out for you. So we talked about several things that can affect your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. And you can have one of them or you can have many of them. So just because you tried the one thing, oh, well, I stopped drinking and I'm still waking up at night, because there could be more than one thing. But the first thing that we really have to do is change our mindset about sleep. Because for many of us, not sleeping and getting through the day is like a badge of honor. Like, I only sleep 4 hours. Successful people don't sleep a lot. Early bird gets the worm. All these kind of like mantras that people have. We have to let go of that concept and understand that you're only at your best if you have adequate sleep. And recognize that you need to do more than one thing to fix this. Just because you fix your leaky gut, you might still have insomnia because maybe we haven't corrected your nutritional deficiencies or the timing of your caffeine. In conventional medicine, it's this concept of like one thing will fix it, one pill will fix it. If you have insomnia, here's a sleeping pill. But in functional medicine, you have to peel it layer by layer and address it one by one. Look at the inflammation in your body. Where is it coming from? Is it the gut, hormonal changes, nutrient deficiencies? Is it a food sensitivity? Are we having stimulants at the wrong time, exposure to light at the wrong time? To have a good night's sleep, you have to start thinking about it. And from the minute you wake up, make the right decisions at the right time throughout the day so that at night you can fall asleep. Be sure that your bedroom is a sanctuary, that's a place of rest and relaxation, dark, quiet, cool. My wife loves when I say that it's cool because I used to fight her on this, and it turns out you really need a cold bedroom. So you're right, Gina. Put the electronics out of the bedroom, or turn it off if you don't want to take them out of the bedroom. Get rid of the light exposures, even your chargers. Try to make it as dark as possible. And schedule a transition in your day. You can't be running around and then lie down and expect to fall asleep. There needs to be like a subtle transition where you finish up the work emails and finishing up and responding to work or anything else that's super stressful. Bring it down, maybe read a book, journal, take a bath, something that lets your brain know day is over and we're shifting into night. And of course, I gave you a lot of homework and a lot of things you need to fix in your environment. And you could always schedule to work with us so that we can help you find the root cause of what's going on, whether it's to fix your belly or your hormones or other source of information. So wherever you are, if you want to work with us, the way to reach us is at The New Method on every platform except for Twitter, because I talk too much, thenewmethod.com. You can send us a message in any way. We want you to become the game changer in your life because, let me put it up here, you always knew there was a better way. I will